If asking for clarification at work makes you feel awkward, underprepared, or less capable, the problem is usually not the question itself. It's how the question is framed. A lot of professionals hesitate because they think asking for clarification makes them seem like they're the only one who's not sure what's going on. So they stay quiet, guess, or move forward with a partial understanding. Then the real problem appears later. A much better approach is much simpler. You want three parts: anchor, question, purpose. That is the structure. Show what you understand first. Ask the specific question, then make clear what you're trying to get right. If you do that well, you can ask for clarification without sounding like you're unprepared or not paying attention. So, let's make this practical. For this part, we'll talk about the anchor. This is where you show the part you already understand before asking the question. Not to impress people and not to over-explain, just to show that you're following the discussion and narrowing in on the unclear point. A useful question to ask yourself here is, what do I already understand clearly? And another good question is, what can I say first so my question sounds focused and not lost? That matters because a lot of people ask vague clarification questions. They say things like, can you explain that again? Or, I don't get it. Or, what do you mean? Those questions can make you sound less prepared because they give no shape to the confusion. So, in the first part here, your job is to create context. That can sound like, I understand that the priority is shifting to the client-facing timeline. Or, I see that we want to finalize this before the next review. Or, I understand the overall direction here. That's enough. You are showing that the question is specific, not general confusion. The second part is question. This is where you ask for the missing piece clearly. And this part matters because a lot of professionals weaken themselves by asking in a way that sounds too broad, too hesitant, or too apologetic. A useful question to ask yourself here is, what exactly is unclear to me? Another one is, if I had to ask this in one sentence, what is the real question? That helps because good clarification questions are usually narrow. They focus on one missing piece. Is the unclear part the timeline, the owner, the next step, the decision point, priority, definition? What is the actual gap? This is what you need to ask. So instead of saying, sorry, I'm a little confused, you can say, who owns the final approval on that piece? Or, is the expectation that this is done before the client review or after? Or, when you say rollout, are you referring to the internal release or the external launch? That sounds much stronger because now the question is clear and useful. The third part is purpose. This is where you show why you are asking. And this is important because clarification often sounds more professional when people can hear the practical reason behind it. A good question to ask yourself here is, what am I trying to get right? Or, why does this clarification matter for the work? That keeps the question grounded in execution, because strong workplace communication usually sounds tied to accuracy, alignment, timing, or ownership, not insecurity, not self-protection. So this part can sound like, I just want to make sure I'm working from the right timeline. Or, I want to make sure I'm aligning with the correct owner before I move forward. Or, I'm asking so I handle the next step the right way. That gives the question direction. So when you put the three parts together, it becomes much easier to ask. Anchor, show what you understand. Question: ask for the missing piece. Purpose: explain what you are trying to get right. That is the structure. And it works because it keeps you away from two common mistakes. The first is vague confusion. That is when your question sounds too broad and people are not sure what you missed. The second is silence. That is when you do not ask at all and the misunderstanding grows. You want the middle, clear and professional. For example, I understand that this needs to move before the next client review. Who is making the final call on the content changes? I want to make sure I'm aligning with the right approval path before I move forward. That works because the question is easy to follow. It shows understanding. It asks for the missing piece, and it gives a clear reason for asking. Another mistake people make is adding too much apology before the question. They say, "Sorry, maybe I missed this," or "Sorry if this is obvious," or "This might be a silly question." That usually weakens a moment. You do not need to make your question smaller before you ask it. If the clarification helps the work, it's a valid question. So keep the language steady. Ask it cleanly. Then stop once the question is clear. Now, this matters even more in front of senior people, because that's when many professionals start feeling pressure to sound fully certain even when something is still unclear. So they nod, stay quiet, and hope they can figure it out later. That usually costs more. The same structure still works in those rooms. You do not need a different personality because the audience is more senior. You need a focused question that sounds work-centered. For example, I understand the direction. When you say we should accelerate this, are you asking for a faster internal turnaround or an earlier client-facing delivery? I want to make sure we move on the right timeline. That is respectful, and it's still clear clarification. So, if you want a practical way to ask for clarification at work without sounding, like you're behind, ask yourself 3 questions. What do I already understand? What exactly is unclear? And what am I trying to get right? Then, check 4 things before you ask. Did I show I was following the discussion? Did I ask one clear question? Did I connect it to the work? And did I stop once the question was clear? That is the goal. Not a safer question, a cleaner one. Because at work, strong communication is not pretending to understand everything immediately. It's making sure the work moves forward clearly.